Well, greetings, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. Now, I've been waiting for a long time to interview my next guest. His name is Nicholas Kline, and he is one of the sharpest minds for esoterica of anyone that I have ever met. Now, Nick is a friend of mine through the Institute for Hermetic Studies, and he has long been an oracle that I sought out for insights into all manners Hermetic. He's also just a great guy who is always ready to help out a friend and whose devotion to study sometimes inspires and sometimes makes me feel a little bit inadequate, if I'm being honest. Now, today, Nick turns his sharp mind and eloquent tongue to topics of tarot, Kabbalah, and astrology, using his talent for analysis and explanation to illuminate those topics in a plain language manner that anyone can benefit from. And so, with that, here is my conversation with Nicholas Kline, the diviner. What are the underlying mechanics for how the tarot system works, how the cards work? Like how do the cards tell us things about the nature of reality?
A metaphor that I find helpful is to think of the process of divination as the diviner taking their hand and reaching it into a river. And the river is composed of different colors. And these different colors of this river represent the different karmic influences of the subject of the reading. The diviner then pulls their hand out of this river and has a collage of colors. The
Hmm.
process of arranging this collage of colors into a coherent picture that provides information to the diviner and their client is the thing that the cards or the other tool of divination accomplishes. So you can think of the different tarot cards as different combinations of this palette of energetic influences. So, what you are doing when you are interpreting a tarot card spread or a horary chart, as an example, is understanding the picture of reality that is being displayed before you. And something that I would like to note is that one of the beautiful things about divinatory work within the scope of esotericism is how effectively it links the intuition and the rational intellect. Because in the case of astrology, as an example, astrology is very analytical, and there are a large number of tools that can be applied to a particular horary chart reading or a natal chart delineation. There are more techniques that can be applied than it is reasonable to apply in one reading or delineation. So the intuition of the astrologer or the tarotist guides their rational intellect on what techniques to apply, on what
Hmm.
significations to consider significant. So there is a harmony between the intuition guiding through, rather, as a means through which the higher self can communicate to the diviner to help guide their rational intellect to look for the different significations that are relevant to the reading. So it
Hmm.
is all a picture of reality relevant to the subject of the reading. And you are using a tool to create that picture and then using your faculties to interpret it.
So you, if I'm interpreting you correctly, you've studied the cards, you know the archetypal associations, you know kind of the esoteric meanings of them. But exactly how that applies to a given situation is then more of like a intuitive interpretation of how those specific cards apply to the person at that time. Would you
It
say that's
is
accurate?
a harmony. And something that you can think about is that the process of studying the significations of the cards through texts, studying their zodiacal attributions, the titles given to them by the Golden Dawn, are all a way to help plant your garden. The process of doing tarot readings, of practicing tarot, and helping develop your intuition is how you water the garden so that it grows and produces fruit. And that is the ability to use the tarot effectively as a tool to help assist yourself and assist others.
Hmm. Was there any particular reason that you think the tarot appealed to you as opposed to other forms of divination like I Ching or something like that?
The humorous thing is, I also do I Ching. I do Western geomancy. John Michael Greer's description of how geomancy functions in his book on geomancy is also very resonant with what I described using the
Hmm.
river metaphor. So I recommend that for a source for understanding the process of divination. I'm trained on Horary. I'm trained on natal chart delineation also. And I have, as an example, different types of situations that I use different divinatory tools for. I find the I Ching is challenging and very useful for bigger scope questions, whereas geomancy is very approachable and flexible. And because a geomancy reading can be interpreted through a shield chart and a house-based chart, you can make a decision about how much nuance you want in the reading. And horary is extremely complex and nuanced and is very good for creating a very accurate, detailed description of a question and how that question is going to unfold. And you get a more chronologically focused set of information because when you're doing a horary chart reading, whether an aspect is separating or applying to relevant planets and the signs that those planets are in gives you chronological information about the subject of your question. So if
Hmm.
knowing the details of the timeline is important, Hori is good for that type of divination. Big picture questions, the I Ching is good. Things that unfold both non-deterministically and in a way that is over a large scale of time is what I find I Ching is helpful for.
Hmm.
Geomancy is generally useful for a wide variety of questions and is very approachable. Tarot, you can similarly contour the level of detail for the reading because you determine what type of spread to use. And by choosing what type of spread to use, you have a very flexible way of participating with the macrocosm in answering the question. As an example, the weekly reading that I do for myself is a reading I designed, which is a 5 card, 4 element tarot card reading. I have one card representing me as the querent, and then I have a card for each of the Empedoclean elements. So the air quadrant would resonate more with my rational intellect, my mental content. Fire would be my will and drive. Water is emotion and the subconscious, and earth is my material circumstances.
Oh, fascinating, man.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's did you say that is a spread that you came up with, or is that like a?
Correct.
Oh, really?
Correct.
Fascinating. Have you shared it with anybody? Has anybody tried it?
I did some Googling. I think there are similar spreads online, and I have used this reading in my consultation business before, and
Hmm.
I've gotten positive feedback from clients.
That's really fascinating, man. So, all right. Now we kind of talked about those mechanics of how the tarot readings work, and it was kind of similar to astrology, but do you see any other similarities between tarot and astrology? And what I mean here is mainly the kind of like underlying esoteric mechanics that are driving these things. Did you see a relation between those? And let me know if that question's too
Ultimately,
confusing.
no, that is okay. Ultimately, the divinatory techniques are a way to participate with the macrocosm in the process of creation. So the technique is the language that the universe is using to speak to you about the subject of your question. And different languages can be more effective for conveying different types of information. So
Okay.
that is why some divinatory techniques are preferable for answering different types of questions. And for the tarot and astrology specifically, they have a strong amount of overlap. You know, Jamie Paul Lamb, my mentor, he has trained me on some processes that involve converting a tarot card reading into an astrological chart or a chart into a reading because they share attributions. Every
Hmm.
tarot card has an astrological attribution. And if you train on, as I mentioned, seeding your garden with this information, you equip your rational intellect with the different correspondences and the significations and the traditional interpretations of the cards so that when your intuition arises in the process of doing the reading, it helps guide your rational intellect to know which techniques to use, which significations are significant, if it would be useful to consult the title cards, rather the titles of the cards from the Golden Dawn as an example, or the color scales also. Frequently, when I'm working with a client and I'm doing a tarot card reading, there will be a point in the reading where I ask them to tell me what it is in the cards that they are drawn to specifically. And
Hmm.
I will frequently ask them if there are any specific colors that they are drawn to, because as you likely know, with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, there was a very limited number of colors that the deck was made with. And the choices of color was very deliberate. So there could be links between cards in a spread through
Hmm.
their shared colors. So
That's
that is again the interrelation of the rational intellect, knowing that there were deliberate choices about which colors were used on which cards, and the intuition guiding the diviner and their client about which colors to notice, which are significant to this particular question.
that's super interesting, man. So when we're talking about all of these things, any kind of divinatory practices, any kind of predictive practices, how does free will fit into all of this? Like if somebody, if you read somebody's spread or you look at their chart and something seems like it's pretty clearly being pointed to, um, are we all just prisoners of the cards and the stars, or where does free will fall into all of this?
Something I tell all of my clients is that reality is not a fixed system. The way things unfold
That's a
are,
great line, man. Reality is not
I
a fixed
learned it from
system.
Mark.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I
No,
love
that
it.
is okay. The way things unfold, such as karmas, the influences described in tarot and astrology, unfold in a non-deterministic way. The energies of the macrocosm, the divine will of creation, is constantly interrelating with all human beings, which are microcosms, images of the creator. And as I'm confident you and a number of the audience have heard, part of the process of esotericism is to realize one's role as a co-creator with the divine. And one of the ways that divination is useful as part of this practice is to receive information about the macrocosm that one can act upon. Because if the information obtained through a divinatory reading could not be acted upon in a way where change was possible, the utility of those practices would be extremely limited. And this goes all the way back to the magical traditions of Babylon, of understanding the astrological influences and how they can be harnessed or mitigated through ceremonial magic, as an example. So, the way that I recommend understanding the purpose of a reading is to understand the energies influencing the subject of the question and how they can be manipulated towards something that is healthy, positive, self-actualizing.
Hmm.
One of the guiding ethos, rather the guiding ethos of my tarot and astrology consulting business comes from an ancient Chinese aphorism, which can be translated as a fool is led by his stars, a wise man guides his.
Hmm.
You do astrology to learn how to guide your stars, understand your interior toolkit, the energetic resonances within you, the tendencies such as the habits that form as a result of your rather of the astrological influences that were active when you incarnated, and you learn what these patterns are so that you can dissolve the unhelpful patterns, reinforce the healthy patterns, and
Hmm.
create new healthy patterns. It is not to, rather, it is not preferable to perceive the information in a natal chart delineation as a static state. It is dynamic. It is information provided to you so that you may act upon it.
Fascinating, man, and so eloquently explained as always. So, um, I would assume it gets to a point where somebody has done enough work that they can completely, or maybe I shouldn't assume, I should ask. If somebody does enough work, um, freeing themselves from these karmic bonds, which a loose, problematic way to say it, but it's a way to say it. Can they eventually get to a point where they free themselves from their astrological fate entirely?
Yes, that is something that is described in a number of ways and is ultimately heonosis. A union with the divine is a rather includes within it a release from karma. And as Mark has described, karma can be understood through habits that causes create effects that resonate with the energy of the cause. And for human beings, microcosmically, if you rather if you do a pattern of behavior, that pattern of behavior creates an energetic pattern within you, which has a natural tendency to renew itself.
Okay,
And by understanding that these patterns of behavior exist within you, they have energy, they have a fuel to continue their operation. These patterns can be installed in you, such as when you're a child, and you have the power to dissolve these patterns and create new ones. And ultimately, to be able to act without the influence of karma having any material impact on you, without your habits having any material impact on you, is part of being free of karma. It is to act spontaneously and both present in the moment and with full access to one's faculties, that any obscurances. Something that, as an example, is praised in Taoist esotericism is spontaneity. And that is an expression of being free from karma. Because if you are able to act spontaneously, it means that you are acting in a way that is not bound by your past patterns of behavior.
hmm.
You've stepped off the hamster wheel. You're exploring the remainder of the terrain to
That
the point where
sounds
you
like
leave the cage entirely.
it sounds like a great place to be, man. It's interesting when you're talking about the habits as these cyclical patterns inside of us. I was struck by how interesting that is because it's kind of like a microcosmic representation of the stars themselves, which follow, orbital patterns. It's all of these circular patterns working within us that are also indicated by the circular patterns working out without us. And I just find that very fascinating.
Yes, and that is, again, one of the beautiful things about astrology is that you can gain a greater appreciation of how each human being is a reflection of the divine will of creation, of a reflection of the divine, because you contain within you everything, everything perceivable, and ultimately everything beyond perception. You either contain a link to or is within you.
So I've read, there's all these accounts of the history of the tarot, and there's, as far as I know, the most accepted line of scholarship on it now is that it actually started as just a bunch of playing cards, and it was only over time that it became used for esoteric and divinatory purposes. But that raises like an interesting question to me, which is, were the cards put here with those secrets waiting for us to discover? Or did they just happen by chance and human consciousness brought out this other aspect of them? Like, what do you think about that? How do you think they're tied into the cosmic mind?
What I think is helpful to be mindful of is how, when you incorporate the invisible levels of reality into your understanding of cause and effect, there can be sequences of developments within physically manifest reality that can appear discontinuous, synchronicities, as Jung would call them, that incorporate into that causal chain influences in the astral, as an example, that are not apparent.
Hmm.
So, what I think is likely is that the tarot, rather, what I know to be correct is that the tarot exists as information and as a means of accessing the invisible levels of reality. And it looked for pathways to manifest in physically manifest reality. And one of those pathways was in the decks of cards that were used, if I recall correctly, by Italian nobles
Hmm.
in Europe. So, is there a direct physical link between ancient Egypt, as an example, and the specific images that were used in the early tarot card decks? I'm not certain if that physically demonstrable link exists.
Okay.
What I know is certain is that the information within the cards and that they are a means of accessing the invisible is something that existed in these invisible levels of reality and looked for a means to manifest.
Hmm.
So if you're comfortable with incorporating the invisible levels of reality into your understanding of reality, then the next step is to acknowledge that there can be causal chains. And this is important for understanding the mechanisms of magic, that this causal chain goes into the invisible and then manifests in this what appears asynchronous, non-deterministic way back in physically manifest reality.
Man, I love being able to that visualization tool that you just gave. And the conceptually it reminds me of Greer's book Twilight of Pluto, where he said that these planetary bodies they enter human awareness, like basically at the time they're quote unquote supposed to. And he talks about as Pluto goes further back out, I think it's going to become undetectable or something, that its influence on astrology will weaken over time. It's kind of the same concept, right? Like things come into consciousness at a time when they're meant to impact consciousness.
Yes, that is another useful example. The discovery dates of the planets and the significant events involving the outer planets, as an example, is part of the dialogue between human beings and the universe. And that is, again, the one key point that I would like to impress upon the viewers is ultimately all divinatory systems are about you as the diviner establishing a dialogue with the divine will of creation as it expresses itself through the universe. That is a consistent through line for all divinatory systems, whether it is the will of heaven, as understood within Taoism and Taoist esotericism, whether it is described as the anima mundi through geomancy. It is about establishing a dialogue between
Mm.
the esotericist diviner and the will of the divine.
I've heard you say some very interesting things about the Kabbalistic pathworking, which seems to have been a major point of your study for some time, both through Dubuis and Mark, and I'm sure through other people. Do you see any kind of correlation between the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah and Tarot? Is there any kind of connection there?
Yes, as I mentioned, the tarot cards act as a means of accessing the invisible levels of reality. And the tarot cards, as I'm confident a number of your viewers are familiar with, can be attributed to the paths on the Tree of Life. And the cards, as I mentioned, can be incorporated into what can be described as synthemata or tokens that resonate with a particular energy. And when you are doing a path working or another type of ceremonial magical operation that is intended to access these levels of reality, what you are intending to do is to collect enough synthemata, enough of an energetic charge that resonates with that level of reality, so that when you put your intention into the ritual, the synthemata act as the rungs on the ladder to get you to that invisible level of reality. And
Mm.
the tarot cards are a very effective set of rungs. You can use the cards, sigils, crystals and stones, incense, plant tinctures. All of this can be compiled to create this energetic ambiance that then becomes these rungs that you ascend. This is one of the reasons why metaphors such as Jacob's ladder can be very effective, which is also used, as Jean has mentioned, as a very useful tool for working the 32nd path, is this concept of acknowledging and integrating into your understanding of reality that physically manifest reality is part of a continuum, an energetic continuum of layers of reality. And there are means by which you can tune your consciousness to these invisible levels of reality. This happens through the use of energy. The energy will go as it is directed to go. So, one of the ways that you can allow your higher self, your inner master, to direct that energy is to give it tools and foci to direct that energy towards.
Hmm.
The tarot cards accomplish this goal.
Hmm. So if some like people come to you for tarot readings about normal life stuff, um, have you used them or could you use them to help somebody with their own spiritual development? Like if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out where to go next," could you use the tarot cards in that way?
Yes, there are limits to how much one person can help someone else with their own inner awakening. What would
Okay.
be useful as a divinatory consultation for assisting someone else with their own esoteric development would be to assist them in their decision making and what to focus on. So if someone came to me and they were interested in having assistance provided for their esoteric development, I would likely work with them to focus on a discrete question, such
Hmm.
as, would it be good for me to join this lodge?
Hmm.
Is this a
Okay.
good practice for me? Or as an example, what is the energetic state of my microcosm? And
Hmm.
what do I need to work on? For that, I would use the 5 card, 4 element tarot card reading, as that would give information on how to achieve elemental equilibrium. If
Hmm.
the client got challenging cards in earth or water, as an example, I could advise them to work on earth and water and what types of practices that would be useful. So those would be some suggestions I would have for someone who was looking for assistance.
Hmm. Okay.
Ultimately, it is through their labor that they elevate their consciousness and through the grace of the divine.
Hmm.
So the diviner as an aid and a consultant can help guide that person in their decision making and help focus their attention on useful objectives.
Very interesting. And I just wanted to go back real quickly earlier. I didn't realize that Jamie was your mentor.
Yes,
Oh, very cool.
he
I can't
trained
think
me
of a
on
better
natal.
mentor.
Yes, I feel very grateful to have Jamie as my mentor. He's taught me natal astrology, and I'm certified by the Institute for Hermetic Studies to do natal. He has trained me on horary, and he also trained me on calculating temperament. So
Wow.
I can do that also.
Hmm. Yeah, man. He's a number one. He's a genius of these topics, but he's also just a great guy. That's really cool. I'm makes me happy to know that you guys have that connection. You still in good contact with Jamie?
Yes, we text regularly.
Oh wow, very cool, very cool. I hope he's doing well. Um, Man, all right, Nick. Thank you so much for this information, man. Like I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else on these topics that you just feel like discussing? Anything that you feel like wasn't clarified?
The other point that I would like to emphasize is again to understand that when you are doing divinatory practices, it is to understand that the information you are collecting is again not fixed. It is not deterministic. Reality is constantly in a state of creation. So if you are obtaining information whether it suggests that your current course of action is challenging or proceeding smoothly. The best way to interpret this information is with an attitude that you have the capacity to act on the information that the universe is providing you.
Hmm.
It would be unwise to obtain information from a divinatory reading for entertainment purposes and not with the intention to act.
Hmm.
So that would be my suggestion for anyone who is interested in developing a divinatory practice. Beyond that, you can try different techniques to see what you resonate with more. As an example, the I Ching is very word focused. It is about interpreting passages in addition to the very rich set of correspondences that are given for the trigrams and hexagrams. So if that is something you resonate with, you can try that technique. If you enjoy the more pictographic structures, such as geomancy from Western esotericism that has different sets of attributions, you can try that. So that would be my suggestion, is to try different techniques, see what you have a strong resonance with, and then pursue those.
Hmm. And so right now, I know Nick, your schedule is so overloaded. You have so many cool things going on. Are you taking new clients?
Yes, I
Yes,
have
you
a
are.
website. It is Nicholas Kline Astrology Consultation, and there is the instructions for how to book a reading if you would like. I can do tarot and astrology readings. And the process is you contact me, we do an initial intake conversation that is approximately 15 minutes. We can reach a decision about whether it would be useful for you to go through with the consultation process. And then we have a follow-up meeting. And then you have the option to get an additional written report.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, clients that would be good candidates for working with me are clients that are interested in taking the information I can provide them and putting it into action.
All right. And I love that, man. And because, Nick, one of the things that I've really respect as I've gotten to know you is you're one of the most honest people I know. You just have a lot of integrity. And I have no doubt that if you determined that you couldn't help somebody, you would tell them. And I just think that says a lot about you. And it says a lot about you that you have that consultation before you just dive into it, because in such a situation, you very easily could end up taking somebody's money without being able to provide them for much value or being forced to be put in a position where you had to kind of lie about it. And so I just really respect the fact that you make sure that you can actually help people before you set anything further up.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Oh, yes, sir. Um, all right, man. So do you have anything in addition to the readings that you provide, do you have any other esoteric projects or anything that you would like to share with anybody?
I will mention something that I'm in the process of developing, which is that I have a manuscript about trauma processing and my esoteric work. And I intend to develop this into a book that will be published. And some of the topics that will be in the book will include, as an example, how alchemical work and ceremonial magical work and meditation can be incorporated into grief processing, which is very Saturnian,
Hmm.
how solar influences can be incorporated into the process of individuating, such as individuating from abusive parents. So I am in the process of compiling this text that is very operational and very practical to address the largely ignored epidemic of chronic trauma and how people who are interested in esoteric work will inevitably confront their unacknowledged traumas. And if they continue with their esoteric work, will heal and move through them. And the text I am writing is intended to assist people with how they can use their esoteric practices to facilitate this healing.
Man, do you
So
have projected any idea when you think you might finish it up?
it will likely be after I finish my current graduate program, as I'm in the process of editing the book, and it has been challenging to edit the book while simultaneously working on all of my papers.
I
So it
can
will likely be
imagine.
after that, and I intend to add more content to the book about more specific operational considerations,
Hmm.
such as a complete overview of all of the different planetary influences and their healing modalities.
Hmm.
So I will flesh the book out more before I work with a publisher.
Very interesting, man. I'm excited to see that. I will. I hope you definitely keep me updated on the progress of how that book goes. And so, man, thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate this. I know you have such a busy schedule right now, and I really appreciate the time. And yeah, man, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jeff, very much.
All right. Take it easy, man.